My name is Michael Delehanty. I work at Compass. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about the multiple offer situation when you're trying to buy a property. And I know the market's changed. I know that most houses don't get multiple offers, but it happened twice to me this past month. One, my client was one of 5 offers, and another client was one of 8 offers on some houses that were really special. So it does happen. And it's always good to be prepared when you're going into these situations. So in an effort to try to be fairly quick with this video, I don't want to make a half an hour video, but I do want to talk a little bit about what happens when you're in that spot where there's more than one buyer going after the house. And we all know Murphy's Law, and it happens all the time. If you run into a property that has been on the market for, I don't know, 90 days, even sometimes, 4 or 5 months, inevitably, the day you find the house, somebody else does too. And so it's really important to be aware of what can you do as a buyer, what can I do as an agent that is going to make you successful and end up getting the house. And some of the things that you're going to really want to think about is how much do you want the property? It's a question I ask all the time. So if you are looking at this house and you think this is the greatest property that you've ever seen and you have to have it, how are you going to feel if you lose it over $5,000 or 10 or some smaller number versus how are you going to feel if you in fact are the winning bidder? There's an ugly rule that I shouldn't call it an ugly rule, but it really is, and it's one that I really like to say to my clients is remember, a general rule of thumb is that the person who's willing to pay the most for the house is the one who gets it. And I know there's times that it isn't always true, but is true more often than you think. The person who is willing to pay the most is the one who gets the house. And sometimes that means paying an extra $1,000, on a $500,000 purchase or even $1 million purchase. Sometimes that extra $1,000 can really add up. So when you're looking at the property, that's the first question to ask is how much do you really want the house? And given the offer that we're going to put in, can we arrive at a percentage of success? If you write this offer, you have 0% chance of getting the house versus if you write, a separate, better offer, you might have an 85 or 90% chance to get the house. And it's a good way to look at it when you're trying to put together, what are the terms, what are the prices. So, having said very little at this point, let me get down to what really matters. The first question you're going to have to ask yourself is how many buyers are there going to be? And oftentimes you won't know. So rely on me as the agent. With the experience in the market, are we going to have 2 offers or are we going to have 20? And we'll get a pretty accurate count. Sometimes the agents do assist with that, especially the good ones. Then you have to ask yourself what's the appraised value of the property, because if a seller is asking $100,000 for their property, when have we ever sold a $100,000 house around here? I don't know, it's been years, but for this purpose, if they're selling the house at $100,000 and you offer $110,000 and it doesn't appraise for $110,000, it only appraises for $100,000, what do you do with that extra $10,000? And if you are using financing that is, 50% loan to value or 70% loan to value, oftentimes that extra $10,000 can just get absorbed. But if you're right on the fringe, if you have a 20% down and the lender's demanding 20%, or you're putting 10% down or even 5% down FHA and the lender is demanding those numbers, then you're going to need to bring in extra cash to pay out the difference. And we want to make sure as the buyer you have that extra cash. The sellers will want to make sure you have that extra cash too, so that's why the proof of funds are so important. So when you're thinking about that, okay, how much is the house going to appraise for? How many other buyers are in play? You can get a very good sense for how much above the list price it is going to go, if any. Sometimes houses are just simply priced incorrectly, and even though there's 10 people going after it, the actual sales price might be lower than the list. And that's a really important thing to know. So that's where I come into play by running comps and telling you what market statistics are. And again, where we just were one of 5, my clients got the house, even though there were 4 other buyers who were fiercely going after that property, but we got it. And we got it because I was really good at negotiating, and I knew what the sellers wanted. I knew what the price was. I knew what the terms were. I just we can get a sense for how this thing comes together. And but we did set a new high value for the neighborhood by, it was $10,000. So we did that with the feeling that it was going to appraise for that amount, just based on what was going on with the neighborhood, and sure enough, we did. So the seller or the buyers didn't need to bring in any additional funds. So that's where it gets, there's more art. So there is science involved in this, but that's where the art of the deal comes into play. That's where you should know, do you need to offer an extra $5,000? Do you need to offer another $150,000? Because sometimes that's the case, versus knowing the house is priced too high and then you would offer, in fact, a little less, or you'd walk away because the seller's being completely unreasonable what the value of that property is. And so, again, there's a dozen factors that come into play. And the last one that I'm going to say is, let's talk about terms. So does the seller need a rent back? Can you give that rent back for free? Or not? That's okay. Do you need seller credits for closing costs? Are you getting very extended and you're going to need additional funds? That can come into play. Would it make more sense to just have a longer escrow period instead of 30 days? Or does a seller want to sell quickly and you're trying to close in 21 days? Those all come into play. And so you're trying to sort out, what is the best thing that works for you as the buyer? How does that match up what the seller needs? And then your offer rises to the top, and that's the one that gets accepted in sometimes a very tense and difficult situation. And that's it's the best way to get through it. So I don't know if I've said everything there is to say about it, because certainly we can talk a lot, but that gives you an overview on what goes on. I will also say one more thing. One more thing is, what if you offer the list price and the house does not appraise? That is another interesting situation, because there's a lot of incentive for you to ask the seller to lower the price down to the appraised value, as compared to when you offer above the list price and then it doesn't appraise. That means the buyer is going to probably need to bring in extra funds, especially if they're right on that cusp of 20% down or 10% down, or some loan limitation that's set in place by the lender. Of course, if there's cash involved, appraisals are not really an issue. But again, if you offer cash, you're probably going to still have to pay the highest amount anyway, because the seller is looking for the highest return. So there's, especially in our market, you're not going to walk in with cash, and God bless you if you have it. That's really fabulous. But you're not going to walk in and offer 10% less and get the property, because anybody else who's using a loan is going to be able to successfully close escrow just as easily as you, and that's more money for the seller. So cash certainly helps. It really helps, but it doesn't mean you're going to be able to steal the property. So again, my name is Michael Delehanty. I work at Compass, and that's a little bit of information about a multiple offer situation and some of the things that I can do to make you successful. So if you really want to talk more about it, my numbers will be about here. Call and let's talk.